Welcome to the Sober Nation FM podcast, where we're putting recovery on the map. I'm your host, Jonathan Sylvester. This show is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Do you want to take your recovery to the next level? Do you want more support, community, and fellowship? Sobriety Engine is an incredible free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. You can get a ton of great tips, resources, and guidance to help you succeed in recovery and in life. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. Sober Nation FM is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle, all while supporting your sobriety, then you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave a review. Nation, let's hop right into today's episode. Today, I'll be speaking with the creator of the FROPRO snack bar and founder of the FROPRO Foundation, Matt Williams. Thanks for coming on the show with me, Matt.
Great to be here, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So I'd like to start off by hearing a bit about your story. So what was life like before you got sober, and how did you actually find your way into recovery?
It was a series of a lot of bad decisions, sprinkled into a few great occasions that were happening in my life. Worked pretty hard and was just one of those guys that, just wasn't ready to admit I needed help for a long, long time. And a lot of people were like, yeah, man, grow up, or, what's your problem? And why can't you get your stuff together? And I really couldn't tell you why. I always thought I was doing the right thing. I worked really hard. So, it sounds really cliche, but the work hard, play hard thing, that was kind of how I operated, because I thought if I continued to excel in, let's just say, school or anything else, it was one of those things where I was like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm doing well here. I'm doing well there. And, if I want to, get after it a little bit, then, I should be fine. But the problem with that is there's a lot of consequences for me. And I was your buddy that got, in trouble. And, I make this analogy all the time. If we were in a big room of people and, let's just say the authorities showed up, I would be, out of everybody there, I'd be the one thrown in the back of the car, or, mouthing off, or, or passed out in the corner. So right. Yeah, it was definitely one of those things where life was great. But anytime I consumed any type of alcohol or chemical, it usually ended up pretty bad.
Okay. Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. Just an extremist to some
Yes.
levels. And yeah,
Yes.
I get that for sure. And so what age was all this starting for you?
Anytime I share my story, I always talk about just kind of that initial, I would say I like the taste of alcohol, but I liked more of the manipulation and hiding it. And I kind of learned that later on, obviously, when I asked for help, and people that were professionals were like, well, you really enjoyed the covering up. You really enjoyed living the double life. You really enjoyed the whole idea of telling people one thing and then doing something else, or doing something else and kind of painting a different picture. So I was definitely the double life guy for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I get that for sure, man. That's really interesting. I've never heard, and I guess we all do this to some extent. I've never heard anyone say that they liked the manipulation, or that kind of leading those two lives. But I think that that makes a really good point. I think a big part of all of that for me wasn't just the substances, it was the lifestyle itself.
Correct.
And just getting wrapped up into that whole thing. So at what point do you think that you started to see that this double life just wasn't working for you anymore?
It got really bad. I would say early 20s. I had my first serious consequence right out of college.
Okay.
And I it was a DUI, and most of my friends and other people had it, or experienced one, or been in the car with somebody else. And I hadn't really lost anybody to drinking and driving, or any other type of alcohol or drug related death. I knew of one or two people,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't connected like in my circle. But everybody had, everybody had a DUI. And it was kind of that like, no, man, don't worry about it. It's just like, you're going to get through it. And I hate saying it, but back then that was like 2003. Yeah. I mean, there had been other things that happened, but I always got away with it. And that was the thing, like growing up in a small town and growing up knowing a lot of different people and knowing the right people, you get kind of get away from, or get out of certain things because so-and-so, or you help that person's family, or you were coaching that person's kid. And there was definitely some of those things where I should have gotten more consequences earlier on, but I never did. So it definitely got really bad, harsher consequences, early 20s, and had my first taste of a 12-step fellowship, because I thought that's what you did when you got a DUI. Is like, oh man, maybe I am an alcoholic. I don't know. And I checked it out, and I lasted maybe a couple days, and I literally listened to these people, and I'm like, man, these people are chumps, they don't know what they're talking about. And it took me another 7 years of pain, frustration, and heartbreak, and just dire consequences before I was able to admit I was an alcoholic.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that 100%. I mean, I think I had what is a pretty typical first experience that a lot of people had, and it's kind of what you just said. Like, these people just haven't figured it out, basically.
Right.
The equation that I have clearly figured out, even though I'm sitting in the same room as him. But I was thinking, crazy, it's a cult, it's this, it's that. And obviously that didn't serve me too well at the time. But so you go in now. Did the judge send you to AA, or you were just like, I feel like this is just kind of what I need to do?
I looked into it.
Okay.
That DUI actually essentially was wiped off my record due to licenses and having different licenses and being in different states. So I knew I had an issue. I always said, like, I knew I had an issue. I knew I had a problem. I knew I had a situation, but I could never admit I was an alcoholic. And I didn't admit it when I went to those rooms. I just kind of sat there and I listened, and I listened to people who I identified with, but it made me mad. And like, I wasn't really there to hear a solution. I was just there to match what I had done or gone through, and been like, I'm nothing like these people, so I should be here. And that, and that's how I drank too. I didn't drink. I didn't need to drink every day. I didn't need to wake up and have a drink. I didn't need to come home from a tough day and try to medicate it. It just was, anytime I put a substance in my body, or I made the decision, or was out with friends, the minute I put something in my body, it was, all bets were off. Like, no off switch, go, 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 go.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you go in, you check it out, not for you. You're moving along through these next 7 years, and I'm guessing to some degree that things are progressing, right? What's going on over these next few years?
Yeah, if you were looking at the timeline from the outside, you'd be like, wow, this is definitely a problem. And before that timeline, it was definitely a problem. Crash cars, close calls, a lot of different things that were evaded. But I think the consequences got worse. The drinking and driving progressed, and the drinking progressed to a point where I was an educator. I taught for 7 years.
Okay.
And I taught elementary school, middle school. And, like I said, during the day, it was, I'd get up, run, work out, go teach, go mentor, go tutor. I'd work at restaurants, I'd bartend, I'd do all these different things. And, the things would come together and things would be okay. And I thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. I was like every other 20 something that was working. And then, like I said, the minute I really went after it, it was, I could pull down progress in a matter of 24 to 48 hours. And that usually involved crashing the car, or not really losing employment, but like dancing around employment, a couple close calls. And in those 7 years, it just got worse and worse and worse, to where it ended up me really just drinking by myself and being by myself and looking out the window thinking that, I was going to get in trouble, or somebody was coming to get me, or, someone's going to find out, because, those lives are starting to come closer and closer together. And Mr. Williams during the day was, the teacher and the coach and the tutor was starting to come really close to like the person that was just completely reckless and completely didn't care who was in front of him, whether it was family, friends, or loved ones. And that, that collided, that collided on May 15th, 2010, down in South Florida, actually, as another DUI. And it was the most public, the most memorable, because I was heavily intoxicated, but like coming in and out of the stupor that I was in, I had thankfully not killed anybody, but the first time I really involved anybody in an accident, and thankfully everybody was okay. And that situation literally stopped traffic on both sides of the road, and it was very close to my my employment. Oh, wow. And I was coming from a party, and I know we'll get into this a little bit later, but like, sure, that last drink was out of a resentment, and I learned that kind of later on. But at that time, I literally crashed, sat on the side of the road, and essentially just waited to be arrested, because I was just like done.
Wow. Wow, yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, and actually that's crazy, because that's my sobriety birthday, May 15th, and I know some other guys that have May sobriety birthdays as well, which is kind of interesting. But
yeah, mine's officially the 17th, because I was like incredibly intoxicated on the 15th.
Okay, so it was like a couple day sobering up, basically.
Yeah, it was go to gun club, sober up. Thankfully, I got out, and there wasn't really anything in my system on the 17th. So that's the day I figured, and there was a lot of other things that happened in the next 48 hours from the 15th to the 17th. But that was the day that, I started to make some phone calls and really ask for help.
I mean, man, we all say double life, right? But when you're
yeah,
to some degree, but and I was doing that, and I'm sure many of the people, watching and listening to this were doing the same thing. But when I listen to you, it's like, I'm just looking at this. It's guys getting up and running. He's going and teaching. I think you said you were a coach as well, right?
Yep.
So that just seems, and then at night, doing what it is we know how to do so well. And yeah, that just seems like two completely opposite ends of the spectrum. So I want to ask, I mean, do you feel like, obviously you knew, or you had an idea of what to do, because you went back to a 12-step program, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, it was. Yes, I did.
Okay. All right. And so do you think that seed was at least planted that first time that you went in, and even though you weren't ready, you said, no, this isn't for me? What made you go back? I'm always interested to hear, like, because the same thing happened to me. What made you go back that direction? Do you think you realized like those people were right, or was it just someone you knew? Like, what was the connection there that brought you back in?
So I forgot about those meetings.
Okay.
Completely.
Okay.
And that part of my life was like the 5th year of college. I graduated and I was living in Maryland, and every other night was alcohol, drugs, and just a lot of just disaster.
Okay. So just different chapter
Completely. Yeah. And I remember the instance of it being a very public thing, mm-hmm. Getting arrested and showing up to work Monday. And one of my students' mothers was like, I think you should really call my husband. And I was terrified of this guy, like not terrified like he was going to beat me up, but he was just one of those guys that was like, I felt he could see me when no one else could see me.
Wow.
And this guy, we had a conversation. It was more along the lines of him telling me what I was going to do. And that meant he was going to pick me up. And I was terrified. I was like, what do you mean you're going to pick me up? He's like, listen, let me come talk to you. And he picked me up and he took me to an AA meeting, and he was like 20 something years sober. And he took me to a meeting, and I hope that's okay. I say that here.
Yeah.
And I just remember going in and just kind of like looking around and watching, and something was different, because I was seeing people happy. I was seeing people high five and hug. And I was, watching this general kind of most of the people in the room just genuinely happy to be here. And it really pissed me off because I didn't know, I didn't know what that felt like.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there and listening, and he nudged me and was like, "You're up." And he kind of pushed me to tell everyone who I was, what I was. And I proceeded for like 5 minutes to like vomit on the meeting about, oh, my poor me, and blah, 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 blah.
Right. Yeah.
And it was crazy because after that, I started to hear people share about their experience. And the first guy that raised his hand, called me out, and I didn't like being called out. I mean, who does? And he just says, yeah. And he just, it's like, I'm telling everybody this, like these people, I don't know the most painful thing that's going on. Like I lost my job. I lost my driver's license. I lost the house. I lost the girl, blah, 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 blah. And everybody's just sitting and smiling and nodding. And I was like, man, F these people.
Yeah.
What do they think so funny? And I know they weren't laughing at me, but they were like, man, this kid's going through the emotional ringer. And I remember the guy raising his hand and he goes, man, I remember when I was just like you. You're a scared little boy and you have no idea what you're doing.
Wow.
And I was, hey, no one talks to me that way. But I sat there and I listened, and then I listened to everybody, and I listened with an ear for similarities. And the craziest thing started to happen. I started to feel okay because other people had gone through what I had gone through. Other people had lost jobs. Other people had really struggled and like been through some things that I was like, man, I don't know how you're sitting here. If that happened to me, there's a chance I'd be dead.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first feeling. And then the whole love of the place and the fellowship of, hey man, what do you need? You need a ride? You need this? You need that? And like, it was the first time, because I was raised in a great family, but like, it was the first time someone was like, we don't want anything from you other than you showing up for an hour.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit before, maybe a little after, but like, you got nothing else to do. You lost everything.
Yeah.
So so what's next?
Wow, man, that's awesome. And I'm just as I hear you describe that was exactly my experience. Exactly. And just everything you described, like, hearing, I remember like the first meeting or two where I was listening. Like things were still pretty foggy, but what I do remember, and this is the craziest thing, this was almost 7 years ago now, and I was in rehab, and I remember some of these, like what really struck me and what was awesome for me was seeing some younger people.
Sure.
Exactly what you described. Like they were happy. They seemed to like, have their lives together. And they were sober too. Like that was the thing that was just really crazy to me. But I remember this one girl, she had kind of an interesting name, and I actually ran into her at a meeting the other day, and I remembered her 7 years prior specifically sharing. Wow. Because she was just like so happy. And so, but one of the things you mentioned is this guy like telling you what to do. And in most recovery programs, especially, a 12-step program, it's supposed to be suggestive, right? But I think I had a pretty similar experience, and some other guys around me that were not very, I mean, they basically laid it out to me like this, like, hey, these are suggestions, but the people that take these suggestions are the ones that are successful. Like I highly recommend that you do this. And so did he end up sponsoring you as well, or did you find another sponsor? Or?
No, I was kind of too close to him and his family. Like there was a couple families that were really good to me, and you get close to, as a teacher, you get close to certain families. And I was, from New York, so I didn't really know anybody down here when I got here. It was just a tremendous opportunity for me to like leave everything that I thought was, New York, Stamford, Connecticut, and Westchester, and completely leave that back. Oh man, if I leave here, everything's going to be great,
Right.
And, when I first got down here, within 24 hours, I was completely hammered because I lived on the beach, and like I'm 27 at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he didn't become my sponsor, but he said, you don't have to rush into anything. Just listen and listen to the people that share. And if somebody strikes you as you can, strikes you as something that you can relate to on a deeper level, ask them. And I remember I asked this kid, and he had like 8 sponsees, and I didn't really know what that meant. And he was just like, "Hey man, I just got to be honest with you. I think you're great. You can call me anytime, but I got one of my guys that I think would be a good fit." And that guy worked with me for a couple months, and he went out to do some research, but I had been going to enough meetings, and I had been, I did a month of meetings. I was fortunate enough to go into a treatment program that, had 12-step fellowships in it, and also allowed me to go to certain men's meetings in the area. And I remember, it's weird. I remember I'd heard a guy a couple times, share and speak, and I bumped him at the gym, and it was right around the time I wasn't really sure what my sponsor at the time was doing. And I said, "Hey man, I don't really know you. I've heard you speak. My name's, Matt, and I'm looking for a new sponsor." And it's like weird asking a guy, like you're in the gym and you're like, "Hey man, I don't know you, but like, can you help save my life, please?"
Yeah, exactly.
And I worked with him for a little while, and it was that kind of like tough love situation. This guy, he had what I wanted too, because I'd heard him. He had like 4 kids. He had a house, a business, and he was busy, and he was like crushing AA, and he was doing this, he was doing that. And I was like, he was golfing, he was doing all these fun things, and his life was so full. And I was like, man, I really want that. And man, he really laid it out, and he said, "Listen, man, I'm busy." He goes, I'll never forget this. And I share this all the time. Like, I forgot, like one day I missed calling him, and he wasn't like too aggressive, like that, "Hey, if you miss a phone call, never call me again."
Right.
And I called him the next day. I was like, "Hey man, I'm sorry I didn't call you. Why didn't you call me?" And this is what rocked my world. He goes, "Man, when you have something I want, I'll call you."
Wow.
And I was like, "Buddy, that's a little harsh." And he's like, "Listen," he goes, "you know the deal. You didn't make it a priority. You didn't call me yesterday." And those are the things I grew up learning. Like I went to certain places and I saw these guys drinking coffee, and they were all like doing stuff before the meeting. And I looked at them. I was like, "Yeah, man, why are we doing that?" And he goes, "Once again, let me break this down for you. I have a very full life. I have 4 children. I have a job. I have this. I have that. I am here with you. I would be here without you. If you want that, go build it yourself." And I was like, okay. And that was the thing. Like, there were these like so many pivotal moments that in early sobriety that I still remember, like clear as day. I remember where I was, how it was said, the tone, everything, and it sticks with me. And unfortunately, that guy went back out and do some more research, and I worked with another guy. And it's just funny, man, because like the guy, I have a bunch of friends that I grew up with that are no longer here on this planet, unfortunately. And then there's a couple guys that I grew up with that have been in these rooms for 20 plus years, and I'm 38. So, it's kind of crazy that, I'm connected to some of these guys I grew up with, and, a couple other guys that just came down here the last couple of years that, their life was completely unmanageable. And, the other option was, jail, institution, or death. And like, it's crazy what this, what sobriety and what the fellowship and what all this can do if you actually do it.
Yeah. No,
I got off on a little tangent there. Sorry.
No, man, that's all awesome stuff. And I learned a lot of the same things. And I was definitely, like I said, I was grateful that I had some guys around me, especially my sponsor, that was just, he didn't beat around the bush. And I think I've found myself having this conversation a lot lately. I think it's just so important. We need people in our lives that are just going to tell us like, "Hey, this is what's up, man. Like, you're messing up, or just look, like, you've been making bad decisions for a really long time.
Yep.
This is just what you need to do." And so I was, like I said, I know it's a suggested program, but really, I think, thankfully, I'm so grateful for this. I got to the point where I realized that I just didn't know shit. And I really just needed some people to tell me what to do, because I was just failing at life, period.
100%.
And so I get that. And I get the calling thing too. I mean, my sponsor was kind of the same way, as I would call him. And then after a certain period of time, he might kind of call and check in on me. But I think he kind of laid out to me like, hey, if you're not calling me, there's probably some spiritual growth or something you're going through that you need to be going through. And I'm probably just going to let you go through that until I hear from you. So I get that. Now, let me ask you, so it sounds like you start getting into this, you go to the meetings, you go to treatment that's also, kind of combined, I guess, with a 12-step program. It sounds like you're building kind of a team of guys around you that also have solid sobriety, I'm guessing, which is awesome. And so you get rolling. I guess I'm kind of curious. I always like asking this. What were some of the biggest challenges that you think you faced early on? Because obviously it isn't just, perfection right off the bat when we get into this deal.
Sure. I think entitlement was a huge one. I don't know. I wasn't raised that way, but entitlement was a huge one. And losing a driver's license and being in a state where the public transportation is less than stellar.
Yeah.
Is definitely a challenge in the fact that you need to get around and you need to be resourceful. And it's not about, relying on other people and taking advantage of people, but it was like, hey, the first 3 years of getting around with that, 2010 to 2013, it was one of the most challenging things. And I remember it. And I'm grateful I went through it because, when someone tells me today, like, oh, I can't get here and can't get there, I'm like, you got a car? You got a bike? You got a bus? It's like, there's no excuse. And, my excuses had run out. So I think the getting around was one of the biggest challenges, but I'm grateful for it. The other thing I really struggled with was boundaries.
Okay.
And people that were my friends for a long time that had to put on like a sober hat and to be like, hey man, like I'm still your friend, but this is life or death. And like, if you're not going to take this seriously, like, I'm not going to watch your life fall apart again. And really learning that balance between, some of my friends. And I think that one of the more challenging, I guess there's not really levels, but, it was just watching the amount of people. Once I was aware of alcoholism and really was kind of in tune with what was going on, is watching people die and watching people make decisions that helped me realize like, wow, my family watched me make these decisions for years. Mm-hmm. And it was, I was super ashamed, man. I was super embarrassed. I had said a lot of things to, my father who had passed while I was still drinking. I'd said a lot of things to people that were just there to help me and to be there for me that I completely rolled over and treated poorly and, scared my family, to a point of like, they love me from afar. Sure. And that's because I set it up that way.
Yeah.
And those are the things. That was the biggest challenge was, no one, you can't say I'm sorry anymore.
Yeah.
You can't say, hey, this is how it's different. It's, that one of my least favorite sayings that my first sponsor always said is time takes time. And I'd be like,
yeah,
hey,
that's a sponsor saying for sure.
Yeah. I'd be like, hey, why don't you shut up a little bit?
Yeah.
But those are the things. It's like, what actions are you going to take? And then I learned about, the living amends and the amends of honoring my father because that was my only option, or honoring the people that were no longer here that really gave everything to see me or to help me get through whatever I was getting through.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. I mean, yeah, because our words mean nothing.
Nothing.
It's like a sorry is just at this point, like, yeah, man, just keep it moving. Cause
keep it moving.
Yeah. Just get out of here.
I think that, and again too, it's like working so hard. It's funny. It's like, you can kind of relate it to the times we're going through right now. It's like you work so hard to do something, mm-hmm. and then all of a sudden it's gone. I couldn't teach anymore. No one's going to hire me. Like the school I was at, I had already said, hey, I promised to be down here for 3 years, but like I wanted to go back to New York, so I didn't resign a contract. And then this happened a month and a half later, and they were like, good luck.
Wow.
And they had every right to do that.
Sure.
I had reneged on a promise I made because I was being selfish. So I think realizing that you work so hard to be involved and be a teacher and be a coach and do all this stuff, and then by making decisions to drink and drug, you throw all that away, and it's like, okay, now what? And what am I going to do? So that was definitely very scary. Just trying to figure out those next steps. And fortunately, I had a lot of great people that were like, hey, you know what? It doesn't really matter, because all you need to focus on is not drinking and drugging today, showing up to a couple meetings, and just literally getting by where you're paying your rent and eating.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think it's so important for me to remember those times of just because, man, I didn't have a driver's license either, and remember those times in the beginning where it was like, wow, I am paying a bill. I'm paying rent, like the most basic of things. And I know one thing that screwed with me, and I don't know if this was your experience at all, but was just comparing myself to, I would see like on Facebook, for instance, like I'm seeing all these friends from high school that are married, working, got 6-figure plus careers, and it's like, man, I just got my first paycheck.
I just made $400 for the month.
I just made $400.
Pat myself on the back.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 100%.
It's tough. It's tough for sure. Well, so things are really different now, to say the least. And so I want to fast forward a little bit. And
sure.
I really want to ask you about FROPRO and just how all of this got started. I mean, this is just, you're coming from somewhere where, like you said, you've no longer a teacher.
Yeah.
That opportunity's gone. Like, how does this all come about? How do you end up starting your own business? Like, how does that even become an idea, considering just what you've been through?
What was great was there were still some parents and families that knew what I had gone through.
Okay.
That said, hey man, listen, everybody goes through some rough times, and no one really knew the depth, because people were like, hey man, you got it was like, oh, you got a DUI. And no one knew the years and the laundry list of things that had gone on, really, unless you like knew me.
Right.
And it was one of those things. I started training a little bit, and a couple of people like, hey man, you're still down in Florida. Hey, can you come train my kid here? Or can you do this or do that? And the girl that I was dating, who, she literally, it's funny, I'm married to her now, and I always laugh about that, because like we were dating a little bit of time, but she, she grew up down here, and she knew a couple of people that were like, hey, I need a tutor, I need a trainer. And, slowly I just started biking, to these places. And, what's great about having nothing is like, there's no expectations. So when you like pull up to a place like, oh, you're really healthy, you bike everywhere, I'm like, yes. That's correct.
Planned it that way.
Yeah, that's how it works. But I started to make these like, it really didn't have much. And, there's like basic necessities in the cupboard, and, some of the things that I had, and, it's basic, standard early recovery is, eggs, peanut butter, oatmeal, maybe a couple other, like, if you're lucky, a steak or a piece of chicken. But I didn't really have much, but I had these things, and I just started making my own like little bars. And it was just weird, because I was at a job that a friend of a friend had given me. And it was one of those things where I'd sit in front of a computer, they'd give me a project, they give me 2 weeks to do it. I would do it in 2 to 3 days. And then they say, why don't you just hang out? If anybody needs help, we'll come get you. So I just started, I was like, oh, I'm not really much of a tech guy. So I just like, I would float around, read nutrition articles, read about all this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, oh man, I'm just going to like make my own bar. It's pretty easy. And I just started making it. And it literally was the thing that I packed in my bag. Cause if you're from Florida and you're in early recovery and you, and you don't have a car, you get a backpack, you put a plastic bag in it, you put a change of shoes. If you're fortunate enough to have 2 pairs of shoes, you put a pair of shorts or something or else to change into, and you ride in a bathing suit. Cause if you ride in a bathing suit and it rains, which it does all the time here, you're going to be okay. Little tip for everybody out there. If you ever end up down here in early sobriety. And the only other thing I had in there were these little bars, and they're peanut butter, just like peanut butter squares. And one of the kids I trained was like, I want to try that. And I said, hey, you got to ask your mom. And because I know like food allergies and being a teacher and like, you know, it's like, God forbid this kid tries it, has anaphylactic shock, passes out. And then then I'm the guy that killed a kid on top of being an alcoholic in town. So she was like, yeah, of course. Yeah. She tried it. She's like, oh, this is really good. And then the mom was like, wow, this is really good. What do you call this? And I was like, I don't really call it anything. I just make it for myself. And she's like, oh, wow, you make your own stuff. It's like pretty entrepreneurial of you. And, you know, the next time I went back there, she was just like, hey, you know, I've been thinking a lot about that. You know, it was really good. Can you make it here? And I just like looked in her closet and I was like, yeah, sure. I like whipped it together. And she's like, Matt, I think you're onto something here. And I'm like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And she says, you know, how do you make it? Because normally it's room temperature. I said, yeah, and I freeze it. You know, it's like this, that, and the other thing. It's like frozen protein, FROPRO. And she's like, starts like banging out stuff on the computer. She was in marketing and PR, which I had no idea.
Wow.
And she was just like, hey, give me your credit card. I was like, I don't have a lot of money. She's like, give me your credit card. You'll figure it out. And she like bought like 10 domain names. It was like www.gofropro.us, you know, all the laundry list. And then she goes, hey, now go test your product. And I was like, hey, I really appreciate you being so nice to me and spending $130 on my credit card. I don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And she said, Matt, you have a great product. Let me just tell you something. My kid is the pickiest eater. She's a brat. And I was like, okay. She said, just go test it. And so I did what any, you know, person in early recovery did is I overthought about it and I got scared and I really didn't do anything about it for about a year. And I just kept making it for myself, training people, biking everywhere. And one of my buddies opened a gym right around the time I started to want to get back into like the counseling role. Cause in school, I was a teacher and wanted to be a counselor as well. So I was like really looking for that perfect fit. And, you know, there was no schools hiring, but treatment centers were hiring. Okay. And the treatment center I went through was like, hey, here's an opportunity. And at the same time, this gym opened and I went in there and I said, listen, I'll take your earliest classes. And they were like ecstatic because no one wants to wake up at 5 a.m. and teach. And I was like, I will do it. And like, just so you guys know, I'm sober, so I don't drink. So there'll be no danger of me missing a class because I will be there.
Yeah.
And it was like the first opportunity where I could literally bring in this bar. And I said, all right, let's do this. I brought in this bar and I said, guys, I just want them to try it. I don't want anybody to know it's mine. I really want some honest feedback. I don't want anybody to be like, oh yeah, that's the alcoholic, you know, loser kids bar over there. Like, let's say it's good and feel bad for them. Right. Because that's how I really thought. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, if someone doesn't like this, I'm going to be devastated. And the great thing is they're like, yeah, you know, like guys, try this after your workout. You know, this is a new local company and, you know, we just want to see, you know, get your guys' feedback. They just want us to test it. You guys get free product. And people were loving it. People were like, wow, this is great. This is so cool.
So I've got to rewind because like,
right.
Like I said, like I'm supplements, I'm nutrition.
Right.
So I'm thinking through all this. Like I've made like little protein balls before out of like oatmeal and peanut butter. So did you package this? Did you
no.
like,
okay. I put it in like a Ziploc baggie. And that's how it started because that's how I tried. Like I didn't have much.
Okay.
So when I put it out, and this is the funny part, when I put it out, I had used a brownie pan and I had just cut it by hand. And so people were like, oh, are these brownies? What are these? And they tried it and they're like, wow, this is really good. And it was just like a chocolate and it was like whey based and it was all the stuff that was like cheap that I could get.
Yeah.
Right. You know, from like Vitamin Shop. And,
sure.
You know, one lady, she looked at me and she's like, or she was like, wow, I'd love to try this, guys, but I can't. I'm plant-based and I'm a vegan. And I was like, cool. What does that mean? And she's like, well, you use whey-based protein, which is dairy. I can't have it. And everything else is pretty legit in here. And she goes, do you know who makes this? And I was just kind of like, yeah, I do. Like, if I'm being honest, and, I told her, and she's like, great. She's like, well, why don't you try to make it differently? And then I like did a little research, found some plant-based protein, did the whole thing again, brought it back to her. And she's like, wow, this is really good. Give me 100.
Wow.
And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, I need 100. I own a juice bar, or I manage a juice bar. Bring me 100. I said, well, bring you 100 on a plate? She's like, no, figure out how to wrap it, bring it to me, and whenever you're ready, I'll sell them. I was like, okay. And I only knew how to make like 10 to 20 at a time.
Right. Yeah. Like small batches. Yeah.
Right. So we figured that out. I got like remember that like Glad press and seal stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I got that, and like I cut squares out and I wrapped it, put a little sticker on it, and I brought her 100, and they were like different sizes, and they're very close to being the same. Very, very close.
Okay.
But they weren't. And it looked homemade. And I remember I went in there, and like I had lawyer friends who were just friends, and they like wrote up this like 14-page document. And I walk in with the documents and this, and I was like, hi, I'm here. And she was like, Matt, put the paper away. I'm trying to help you out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
She's like, here's the deal. I'm going to put these at the point of sale. And I was like, what does that mean? She's like, when people check out, this will be right there, because that's where our cooler is.
Man, that's awesome.
And I was like, okay. And she goes, I'll let you know. I'm going to buy them for this, but I'm not paying you until I sell all of them. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And later find out that's consignment, and you typically don't want to do that, but whatever.
Right.
3 days go by. She calls me. She's like, Matt, I sold out. I need 100 more.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
And so I made her 100 more. I was like, wow, that's so great. She's like, yeah, people love them. Hey, go talk to my friend in Delray. She's opening a juice bar. This is like when juice bars were starting to get some steam. And I went over there. She's like, yeah, no, it's great. So-and-so told me about it. Let me take 20. And that's kind of how it started, where people were just like, I was working in a treatment facility. I was training and coaching classes, and I was making these things. So I was like literally working 7 days a week. And it was so great because I had spent probably a year and a half, 2 years of only just literally waking up, going to meetings and trying to just make a life that, was doable.
Yeah.
But I tell you this, I was aside from the transportation issue, one of the happiest guys around, because like everything I was doing felt right and felt good. And I had this like I've shared this with like a couple people. I had this like little thing and this little faith, whatever you want to call it, inside of me that was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know what I'm doing is okay. And it's right. And I should keep doing it no matter what anybody else says. Cause there was a lot of people that were like, dude, that's the dumbest thing ever. Dude, we live in Florida, refrigerated snack bar. And this is before anybody was refrigerated. Any of them. I'm not saying I created refrigerated snack bars or frozen snack bars, but this is before the major companies came out and on market, and people were poking holes in it. And I just was like, yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think you bring up a valid point, but like right now, this is what I know, and this is what I'm good at. And it literally, that's how like the grassroots started to take shape, and we started to grow, and we started to go to a couple different accounts. And meanwhile, the girl I'm dating, who is now my wife, like it's just me.
Okay.
And I was like, for the first couple of batches of that juice bar, I was at home, but like, I didn't want to be it's like a cottage. It's called the Cottage Act. I didn't want to have to put a sticker that says I make this in my home, because that makes some people feel uneasy. So I reached out to somebody in the program, and I was like, hey, you got a kitchen, right? And they're like, yeah. I was like, how much would it be if I rented it? And they're like, well, the only times you could do it would be like, typically nighttime. And, you could probably have it from like 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. if you wanted. And I was like, wow. I was like, those really aren't ideal times for me. But I jumped on it, and I took it. And, that's where I really started to dive into doing this on a bigger production level, and like a couple hundred bars went to a couple thousand. I met a guy that was doing some kitchen work. It was like, hey man, I'd love to help you. He was a hard worker and I could see that. And like, there was a couple other people that came and went that, you know, didn't have the work ethic that kind of fit. And, you know, it's crazy. Like I don't want to fast forward too fast, but like,
Sure.
but like, you know, where we are today is incredible. You know, we started with one juice bar and now we're, you know, shipping nationwide. You know, we have accounts we're in all of Whole Foods of Florida. So it's over 30 plus stores of just Whole Foods. We have about 80 retail locations across the country, California, Colorado, New York, Florida. A couple random, obviously, because no one's from Florida. So what's cool is people leave and they go back to wherever they are typically from, if they're not full-time here.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey man, you got to call, you know, ABC Juice and ABC Gym. And, you know, they're great. They're going to love your story. And, you know, or, you know, I was getting connected to people through sobriety or through struggle or through, you know, hardship. And it was just so cool, man. Cause like, I'm the worst salesman on the planet, you know, like, you know, if you're like, hey man, you know, F your company. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no, man, you know, much love. And, you know, if you try the product, you're like, it's not for me. I'm like, hey man, I thank you for trying it. You know, tell me why it's not for you. And, you know, if I can improve upon it, you know, and coming from a position of just like, I'm not going to please everybody because I used to be one of the biggest people pleasers. And not everybody's going to be about a peanut butter bar or an almond butter bar. You know, the market would tell you otherwise. But it was one of those things that it never started out to be a business. It never started out to be something where I was trying to prove something. It was just like, hey man, I really enjoy doing this. This is a fun thing that turned into literally what built the rest of my life outside of everything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's so awesome, man. I love hearing stories like this. And I think, you know, hearing stories like this was kind of an added motivation for me, like in early sobriety. I mean, because I came from like, you know, sales background and entrepreneurial kind of spirit to some degree, you know, even though some of the things may not have been very legal that I was into back in the day.
Yeah, of course.
But you know, that same mindset was there. But you know, I think one thing that you just said that I really liked hearing was like, hey, you know, like people will always appreciate, even if they don't really necessarily like what you're doing, or maybe they're just kind of, you know, yeah, it's okay, fine. They always appreciate hearing your story.
Right.
You know, and for the most part, like people will support you, kind of like you're saying, like these people that maybe you just meet randomly. Oh, yeah, I'm going to hook you up with blah, blah, blah up in New York at this gym. And it's mainly just because of your story and your background. And I think that's so awesome. You know, you're talking about a lot of things here, Matt, a lot of, I guess what we could kind of refer to as just the principles in recovery that I'm hearing have played a major role, not just in your life, but in building this business and making it the success that it is. So tell me, like, how do you balance running a business with your recovery? And really, like, how do you see those two fitting together?
I don't want to say it's easy because I know it's not for some people, but recovery comes first. If I don't have a program, if I'm not, you know, dialed in, if I'm not on my routine, nothing else works. And I learned that, not through like tragic trial and error in the beginning, but you know, it's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Like, I don't need to do this right now. And it's like, no, I need to keep doing what I started doing when I got here. It keeps me dialed in, it keeps it fresh. And, it allows me to, you know, hear, you know, they call it the juice, you know, I mean, like, it allows me to hear the juice of like people that are just coming in and how bad it is out there. And allows me to hear about people that are, you know, doing this a long time, that are still doing it. And because they're doing it, life is just continually getting better. So I think, you know, recovery for me comes first. I'm still doing the same things that this is where the suggestions, like, it's not, hey, do this, but it was like, hey, when you get up, whatever you're understanding in the universe to be of a higher power is, thank whatever that is, whoever that is, whatever that is to you. And for me, it's, I thank God every day that I'm alive. I wake up wherever I'm living or wherever I'm staying, wherever I'm visiting, and I find like a place where it's quiet. And I usually hit my knees, say a little prayer, do a little meditation, and get quiet. And then I have the daily reflections book, and it's the same one that I got when I got here. And I have almost 10 years of journals.
Oh, wow.
From essentially what's based around that book, which is a reading every single day for every day of the year. And sometimes they're short, and sometimes, sorry, I don't know why. All right, I just got cut off there. You can still hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
So like in doing that, it just kind of allows me to get centered for the day. And then typically it's kind of crazy now, like obviously with this quarantine being on, like, I go to Zoom meetings,
right?
But I'm a 7 a.m. guy. So I usually like check in with, the 12-step fellowship in the early morning, and then my day starts. So I think, all of that being said, and all of doing that has really, really helped me do what I'm doing today. And that's the thing, man. It's like, some people are like, wow, that's really boring. Like, well, okay. For me, it really works, and, there's days, like I said, I go through the motions and I'm not connected, and it's a challenging day. And there's days where it's like, man, you could shoot a bullet at me and it would be like, I just feel like complete, like you can't get through this. Like I feel great. I feel strong. I feel untouchable in like a good way, not the way I used to feel when I was like, oh man, I'm 23 and like, you can't touch me.
Right.
But I try to be as connected as possible. I try to do as much service and, work with as many people as I can, because that was done for me. And I think that's where everything comes together, man. And it's, all these things and, all these opportunities that are there to do the right thing. Like, we're going, a lot of people have said years ago, hey, you got to do this. Hey, you got to do that. Like in terms like taking that and going to business. Hey, you should start doing this. I'm like, hey, listen, this is working.
Yeah.
And if this takes me 10, 20 years, great. I love it. The minute I stop loving something or I don't want to do it anymore, I know I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. And, I take my program seriously to the fact, like I have a good time, but like, this is the number one thing. And I made that very clear. Like my wife knows it. She's like, man, stay dialed in, stay connected, because everything else is improved by that. My relationship with my wife, my family, my friends, my business, you talked about, working for a couple places back in the day that were less than stellar.
Yeah.
And, I've been around that. I've watched that. I've seen my friends get sucked into that and they can't get out, and, they may not always go back out, but it's really tough to watch.
Yeah.
And it's cool, man. Like, that balance is everything, and it's really hard. There's days where I just am not connected, and it's a perception thing. And that perception can be skewed because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. But the other side of that is, if it's not going the way that it normally does, I don't beat myself up anymore. Because I used to beat myself up all the time and just be like, oh, it's not perfect. I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people that, whether they're in addiction or not, it's like, you got 10 things to do and you do 9 out of 10 right. I'm not going to focus on the 9 I did right. I'm going to focus on the 1 I did wrong.
Absolutely.
And then I'm going to kick myself over and over for that, and everything else suffers. So,
I get that. That is something that I'm still, and I think I never thought of myself as a perfectionist, like until I came into the program, and it was, I saw it in my first 4th step to some degree. And, I mean, that's me, man. And that's one of the biggest things I have to watch these days is really, it's almost resentments against myself.
100%. That's perfect.
I mean, I don't think there's any other way to to put that. So I want to ask, you're talking about service, you're talking about helping others a little bit. What is the FROPRO Foundation all about, and what are you guys actually working on, and who do you work with?
So, it's funny. I had an opportunity to run the New York City Marathon back in like 2016, and we had this like huge. There was like this huge competition with like Asics and Foot Locker, and it was my first time fundraising. Okay. And like essentially, it was like I was fundraising to go to the New York City Marathon because I was on a team, and I was amazed by how many people came out of nowhere, and people I hadn't even heard from in a while that were like, "Hey man, I've been following along with what you're doing on social media. I think it's great. Good for you." And, awesome. And then we win this competition in 2016. The commercial goes live on the marathon, and people I hadn't heard of in 20, 25 years reach out. "Hey, my brother's struggling. Hey, I lost my sister. Hey, my dad's struggling," and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And a couple of my friends had started like a couple like free workout things. Okay. And I was like, man, this is great. What I found was in kind of directing people to something else, people really didn't understand the connection. So my wife and I, once we opened up FROPRO, the headquarters, which was incredible, like 2 years ago, we said, let's start a foundation where whatever money we raise, we're very clear where it goes. Okay. Like this is 100% of whatever we get goes to wherever we're, it's like if we're raising money we wanted to send a runner to New York City, she was going to get the money to go to New York City. We were going to pay for half of her, whatever we raised, we were going to pay for that donation from the FROPRO Foundation and from our community would go to her. Okay. Or if we were raising money for, workout equipment for people that, give free classes to halfway houses and treatment centers, people that are just getting started, and like how important like working out was in my early recovery and always kind of has been, but it's like raising money and say, Matt and Chelsea are raising money. So like when we started the foundation, it was like, hey, people respond to when we're going out to raise money, and rather than saying, hey, go visit XYZ Foundation and donate, please. Cause like they may not know what XYZ Foundation is. But they know us, they know who we are, they know what we're about. So we started that, and it's been pretty cool, man. Like, it's, we've done some fundraising, and like I said, like I use a couple examples of, helping someone go to the New York City Marathon. We sent a guy and a girl 2 years running, get equipment and raise some funds for people that, couldn't afford, living outside of treatment, that got scholarship for certain things. Okay. We try to do things on the, not that like what everybody else is doing, like scholarship or detox or anything like that. Like, right. Those big companies can do that, but, we're trying to do something along the lines of like, hey, this is going to be, getting so-and-so a training license to become a trainer. Helping them figure out, hey, do I want to go back to school? This is too expensive. Okay, what can we do to help you do that? So there's different situations, and it's, that was like our predominant focus when we started it. It's gotten a little quiet just because I feel like there's so many things happening before all the quarantine stuff, but there was a lot of things going on where it's like there was an event every weekend, and it became, honestly became exhausting. And it was like, hey, we're doing more fundraising, which is great, but it's taking away from living a life that, we were fortunate enough to build. And, if we continue to do what we're doing over here, we can then continue this and not direct too much of our focus on that, and just have that priority of building what we're building.
Yeah. Well, man, that sounds really awesome. I think the main thing that I just heard there that you guys have been doing through this foundation is that it's not, it's about the living life in recovery. And,
100%.
It's not that, hey, this person's just getting sober necessarily. It's like the next few steps. I think that's really cool, because I think there's kind of a gap there. A 100%. Lot of the times it's like, okay, this person's in treatment, they get out of treatment, and then what?
Right.
What's going on? What,
Sure.
what's next? And a lot of people, obviously, if they don't have that support, or they can't get that kind of a little leg up, or that help with school, or that help getting that trainer's certification, or, whatever it is, or just even something cool like going to the New York Marathon. I mean, that can be tough.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. And I also I hear what you're saying about the balance. And I think this is where I like when people say that, just recovery in general, it's not about being selfish. It's about self. And it's in that, hey, I have to take care of myself, because like you said, you were getting a little overextended with the foundation stuff. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm not taking care of myself as much, then I'm not going to be able to continue to do that.
100%.
And I think, like if we were going to look at this in like 12 step terms, which is kind of how I think of it, I think of like the big book, and it's saying, no one solely, like, we don't recommend solely doing this.
Right.
Like some people can do that, but we don't necessarily recommend that. You gotta get out, and you gotta do some different things too.
Sure.
So man, before we wrap up here, I'd like to ask you, Matt, what is one piece of advice that you'd like to share with the Sober Nation?
Oh man, there's a lot of those little tidbits. One thing that always stuck out to me, and I'll always remember, is one of my sponsors used to say, we're in the effort business. We're not in the results business. So whatever you do, if you get to wake up every day, and every day you get a chance to wake up, and put forth maximum effort into whatever it is you're doing, whether it's your work, your family, your kids, your job, your whatever it is, put that effort in, and really chase after whatever you got to do. I think in recovery, it's incredibly easy to get into a routine, and no one likes change. So I think when change starts happening, and like things are, I can't tell you how many times the unknown has happened in the last 10 years where I'm like, man, I don't know what this looks like, because I've never done it. And it's like, no, you didn't get taken this far to be dropped on your face. As long as you're doing the right thing, man, and you got some form of understanding of a program and a routine, I honestly think it's one of, like, I feel like you're unstoppable. So yeah, the effort thing is huge for me. And, nothing, I don't think anything is impossible, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. And again, whatever those reasons are, they're for you. And hopefully they center around a program of recovery, because anything that I've ever done in the program, like it says, like, try to practice these principles in all your affairs. If I'm practicing these principles in whatever I'm doing, it's a home run.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. The effort has to be there. Absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So you can connect with Matt and learn more about FROPRO and the FROPRO Foundation at gofropro.com. Thanks again for coming on with me, Matt.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you letting me be here.
Be sure to check out the show notes for all the info from today's episode. Sober Nation FM is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Sobriety Engine is a free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. This show is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle while supporting your sobriety, you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And again, whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Nation, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.